She moved in on a Tuesday, and by Friday, Logan Whitaker had already made 3 excuses to check his front yard. He told himself it was the gutters, then the mailbox, then a crack in the driveway that had been there since 2019 and had never once bothered him before. The mansion next door had sat empty for 11 months. Now it had lights in every window, a silver Mercedes in the circular drive, and a woman standing on the front steps at 7 in the morning, drinking coffee in a silk blouse, like she was posing for a magazine cover. Logan grabbed his toolbox, went back inside, and told himself to get a grip. He lasted about 4 hours. If a billionaire showed up next door and turned your whole quiet life upside down, would you let her in, or would you do what Logan did and spend 3 weeks pretending you didn't notice? Drop your city in the comments and hit that like button, because this story is about to go somewhere neither of them saw coming, and I want to know exactly how far it travels. The Whitaker house on Glenmore Drive was not the kind of place that made strangers slow down to look. It was a good house, solid bones, clean gutters, a front porch that Logan had rebuilt plank by plank 2 summers ago. But it was the kind of house you drove past without noticing, sandwiched between a retired schoolteacher on the left and, until recently, an empty property on the right that the neighborhood had spent the better part of a year quietly arguing about. The empty property was not a house. Not exactly. It sat on 3/4 of an acre behind a wrought iron gate and a row of red maples that had gone spectacular in October. 8 bedrooms, a detached garage that could fit 4 cars, a rear garden that had gone wild in the vacancy and now looked like something between a nature documentary and a real estate liability. The previous owners, some family from Connecticut that nobody on Glenmore Drive had ever actually met in person, had sold it 18 months ago, and the sale had gotten stuck in some kind of legal complication that the neighbors discussed with more investment than they'd ever given to local elections. Logan had not spent much time thinking about it. He had his own complications. At 32, he ran a home repair and renovation business out of a white Ford F-150 with a magnetic sign on the driver's door that read, "Whitaker Home Services. Reliable, honest, fair." He had built it job by job over 6 years, which was the same 6 years he had spent figuring out how to be the only parent that mattered to a 7-year-old girl named Maisie, which was itself the direct result of a marriage that had ended on a January afternoon with 2 people sitting across from each other at a kitchen table, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He didn't think about the marriage much anymore, or he tried not to. Some nights it came back anyway, not the bad memories, which would have been easier to dismiss, but the specific sound of the house after Renee left, the way the silence had weight to it, the way Maisie had stood in the hallway holding her stuffed rabbit and looked at him like she was waiting for him to explain something he didn't have language for yet. He'd figured it out. Slowly, imperfectly, with more burnt dinners and missed school pickups in the early days than he liked to admit, but he'd figured it out. By the time Victoria Sterling's moving truck appeared on a Tuesday morning in late September, Logan's life had settled into something he recognized as genuinely good. Maisie was in 2nd grade. He had 3 renovation contracts running simultaneously. He made his daughter's lunch every morning, put it in a bag with a little drawing on the napkin, a habit he'd started when she was 4 and couldn't seem to stop. And he was in bed by 10:30 most nights, which he understood was not a thrilling fact about himself, but which he had made his peace with. He first noticed the moving truck because it blocked the end of his driveway for 40 minutes, and he had a supply run to make. He walked out to ask them to shift it forward a few feet, and that was when he saw her. She was standing near the gate, talking on a phone, wearing dark slacks and a white blouse with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. Dark hair pulled back, but not severely. More like she'd pulled it back in a hurry and hadn't thought about it since. She was gesturing with her free hand as she talked, small, precise movements that suggested she was explaining something complicated to someone who wasn't following fast enough. Logan waited. She saw him, held up one finger, 1 minute, and kept talking. He stood there. He was not an impatient man, generally. He looked at the maple trees, he looked at the truck, he looked at the wrought iron gate, which he now noticed had been recently repainted. "Sorry," she said, dropping the phone from her ear. "I've been trying to get them to understand that the sectional is not going in the east bedroom, and apparently that requires more explanation than I anticipated." "No problem," Logan said. "I just need to get out. If they could pull up maybe 15 feet." "Of course." She turned and called something toward the truck that was more direct than anything Logan would have said in the same situation. The truck moved. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for not just honking." He almost laughed. Almost did. She smiled, a real smile, not a polished one, slightly crooked on the left side, and turned back toward the gate. That was it. That was the whole first conversation. He found out who she was the way anyone finds out anything in a neighborhood like theirs. Ruth Calloway, the retired schoolteacher on the left, came over with a plate of lemon bars that same evening and explained, with the barely suppressed energy of someone delivering classified intelligence, that the new neighbor was Victoria Sterling, who was the founder and CEO of Sterling & Co-Mate, which was apparently a design and lifestyle empire worth somewhere north of $4 billion, which Ruth had confirmed via Google on her phone while the bars were in the oven. $4 billion, Ruth said, setting the plate on his kitchen counter with emphasis. "Okay," Logan said. "I'm just saying, that's a lot of zeros." "It is." "She's 30, according to the article." Ruth. "I'm just providing information." Ruth helped herself to a lemon bar. "You should introduce yourself properly. You already talked to her, Jenna, from across the street saw you." "I asked her to move a truck." "That's a start." Logan did not go back over that day. He went over 2 days later, on Thursday, because he had a legitimate reason. The wrought iron gate at the end of her driveway was hanging wrong, tilting inward at the bottom, and he could see from his front porch that the lower hinge was separating from the post. It would get worse fast. He was a home repair contractor. It would have been stranger not to mention it. He rang the bell, which triggered a speaker panel beside the gate. Victoria's voice came through it, slightly distorted. "Who is it?" "Logan Whitaker, from next door. I noticed your gate hinge is pulling out of the post. I can fix it in about 40 minutes if you want." A pause. "How much?" "Nothing. It's a neighbor thing." Another pause, longer. "Give me 5 minutes." She came out in a gray sweater and jeans, hair down this time, carrying 2 coffees. She handed him one without asking how he took it. It had cream in it, which was how he took it, which was either coincidence or extremely good instincts. "You really don't have to do this," she said. "I know." He crouched down to look at the hinge bracket. "But it's going to cost you a lot more if the post cracks." She watched him work without making conversation, which he appreciated. A lot of people felt the need to fill the silence when someone was working in their space. She leaned against the stone pillar on the other side of the gate and drank her coffee and checked her phone a couple of times and didn't apologize for it. He had the hinge reset and the post reinforced inside 35 minutes. "Gate's good," he said, standing up and brushing stone dust from his knees. "What do I actually owe you?" "I told you, nothing." She looked at him with an expression that suggested she did not have a ready category for people who fix things for free. "At least let me pay for the materials. 1/4-inch lag screws and some adhesive anchor. Maybe $3. Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, but getting there. "I feel like I'm getting away with something." "You kind of are," Logan said. "Gate like that would run you $150 at a hardware store call-out rate." "Then I definitely owe you. Next time I need a design consultation on my kitchen, I'll know where to come." That got a real laugh, surprised, like it came out before she could decide whether to let it. He picked up his toolbox and went back home. He didn't think about her for the rest of the afternoon. Or, not much. The first time Maisie met Victoria was an accident, the way most things in Maisie's life happened, because Maisie was 7 and operated with a complete absence of hesitation that Logan had long since stopped trying to moderate. It was the second Saturday of October, 2.5 weeks after Victoria moved in. Logan was on his front porch reviewing a materials estimate for a bathroom renovation in Carytown. Maisie was in the front yard doing something with chalk that had started as a hopscotch grid and evolved into what appeared to be a large-scale map of a world she was inventing in real time. Logan heard the gate open next door. He looked up in time to see Maisie look up, see Victoria coming down her front walk, and immediately stand up and say, "Hi, do you live there?" Victoria stopped. "I do." "My dad fixed your gate." "He did. He's very good at it." "He's good at fixing everything," Maisie said, with the absolute confidence of someone reporting an established fact. "Are you a princess?" A beat. Victoria looked genuinely caught off guard, which Logan suspected did not happen to her often. "No, why?" Maisie thought about it. "You look like one, the kind that's also in charge of stuff." Logan put down his papers and stood up. "Maisie, that's my dad," Maisie told Victoria, apparently feeling some obligation to explain. "He worries I'm rude, but I'm not. I'm direct. He said there's a difference." "I did say that," Logan confirmed, coming down the porch steps. "Sorry, she has no filter." "Don't apologize," Victoria said. "Being direct is a better quality than most people give credit for." She looked at Maisie with something that wasn't the strained politeness adults sometimes performed around children they didn't know. It was just interest. "What's your name?" "Maisie Whitaker. I'm 7. I'm making a map." "Of what?" "A country I invented. It's called Amberfall. It has 2 queens and no one's allowed to be mean on purpose." "That's a good rule," Victoria said. "I know." Maisie considered her. "Do you want to see it?" "Maisie, she might be busy." "I'd love to see it," Victoria said. And that was how Logan spent 40 minutes standing in his front yard watching his daughter explain the geopolitical structure of an imaginary chalk nation to a billionaire who sat cross-legged on the driveway pavement and asked follow-up questions that Maisie clearly found deeply satisfying. Logan watched the whole thing with a feeling that he couldn't immediately name. It was an attraction, or not only that, it was something more specific than that. Something about the way Victoria had sat down on the pavement in her good jeans without any visible calculation, without performing enthusiasm or checking her watch. He had met a lot of people who were good at seeming interested in children. Victoria just was. That bothered him more than if she'd been awkward about it. Awkward would have been easier to file away. October moved through Richmond in long golden afternoons and cold nights that came earlier than anyone expected. Logan finished the Carytown bathroom project, started a deck extension in the Fan District, and turned down 2 projects he didn't have time for, which was a good problem to have and one he'd worked 6 years to earn. He and Victoria fell into a loose pattern that neither of them named or initiated consciously. If they saw each other in the morning, her getting her paper, him loading the truck, they talked. Sometimes for 3 minutes, sometimes for 20. She took her coffee outside most mornings regardless of the temperature, which he'd noticed and not mentioned. He could not have explained why he'd noticed. He learned things piecemeal. She had built her company from a single interior design consultancy she'd started at 23 with money she'd saved working as a junior buyer for a retail chain. She had a younger sister in Portland she talked to frequently, which he inferred from the phone calls he occasionally heard through the fence. She had a broken engagement in her past. She mentioned it once, briefly, in the tone of someone referencing a healed injury rather than an open wound, though Logan wasn't entirely convinced by the tone. "How long ago?" he asked, because he had learned by then that she appreciated direct questions over carefully worded ones. 14 months, she said. "What happened?" She looked at her coffee. "He wanted a particular kind of life. I was always going to be too much of something for it." Logan didn't push. He understood about the specific exhaustion of trying to be a smaller version of yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort. He'd learned that lesson the expensive way, too. He told her about Renee eventually, on an evening when Maisie was at a sleepover and he found himself sitting on his front porch later than usual, and Victoria was doing the same thing on hers, and the conversation drifted there the way conversations do when the light is going and you're not trying to be careful. 6 years, he said. We tried for 4 of them. The last 2 years we were more like roommates with a custody concern. Did you know it was over before it was official? Probably about a year before she left. He looked at the street. I kept thinking it would get better, not because I believed it really, more because I didn't want to be the person who admitted it was done. That's honest, Victoria said. It's not a flattering quality. Honesty usually isn't. He looked at her. She was looking at the street, not at him, which made it easier to look at her than it should have been. Why Richmond? He asked. You could live anywhere. I know. A pause. That's kind of the point, I think. When everywhere is an option, you stop noticing where you actually want to be. I spent 3 years with apartments in 3 cities and I couldn't have told you which one felt like home. And Richmond does? She was quiet for a moment. I'm trying to find out. The afternoon everything got complicated, at least in Logan's head, was a Thursday in early November. He came home at 4:30, still in his work clothes, to find a note on his door from Ruth that said Maisie was at her house eating snickerdoodles and watching a nature documentary. And a second note below that, in different handwriting, precise, a little angular, that said, "Pipe situation in my basement. Not urgent, but concerned. V." He changed his shirt. He didn't examine why he changed his shirt. He went next door. Victoria opened the door in a cream sweater and dark jeans and reading glasses pushed up on her head, which was a combination of things he categorized quickly and then stopped thinking about. "Thanks for coming," she said. "What's the situation?" "There's a pipe junction in the basement that looks like it's been sweating for a while, possibly longer than I've been here. My home inspection flagged minor moisture and I didn't follow up on it, which I'm now thinking was a mistake." "Okay, can I see it?" The Sterling basement was partially finished, a concrete floor and the mechanical section transitioning into tile in what looked like a planned but unfinished media room. Victoria led him to the corner where the main water supply line came in and turned on her phone flashlight to show him a section of copper pipe at the junction of two runs, damp with condensation and showing early signs of pinhole corrosion along the solder joint. "Yeah," Logan said, crouching to look at it. "This has been going on a while. The good news is it hasn't blown. The bad news is it's going to eventually, and you don't want to find out when. How bad is the fix?" "Not terrible. I'll need to cut and replace this section. The solder work is the main thing." He looked at the surrounding pipe runs. "There's also a section here that should have been insulated. That's why you're getting this much condensation. Can you do it tonight?" He should have said he'd schedule it. He had Maisie to get from Ruth's by 7 and dinner to make and a project timeline to sort out before tomorrow. "Yeah," he said. "I can do it tonight. I need to grab some supplies from the truck." He got his kit. When he came back down, Victoria had moved a work lamp to the corner and was sitting on an overturned plastic crate nearby, a glass of water in one hand, apparently planning to keep him company rather than retreat upstairs. "You don't have to stay down here," he said. "I don't have to," she agreed. He worked. She didn't fill the silence gratuitously. The basement smelled like damp concrete and the specific cold of a room that doesn't get sun. Outside, rain had started, the heavy late November kind that settled in for the night rather than passing through. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. Do you like this? The work?" Logan paused on a fitting. "Yeah, I do." "Why?" He thought about it. Not the automatic answer. "I'm good at it. It pays well. The things you said at parties." Things break in specific ways. There's usually a reason. You find the reason, you fix the problem, and when you're done, you can look at it and know for certain it's better than it was. He resumed working. Not a lot of things in life are like that. She was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "They're really not." The rain got heavier. The basement felt smaller without either of them doing anything to make it smaller. Logan was aware of her in the way you become aware of someone when you've stopped pretending not to be. He finished the cut on the bad section and turned to reach past her for the flux brush on the crate, and she had leaned forward slightly to pass it to him before he asked. And for a second they were closer than the space required. Neither of them moved. The rain on the basement windows filled in the silence. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." "Are you trying not to kiss me?" The question landed with the clean precision of a tool placed exactly where it needed to go. He could have deflected. He had deflecting down to a reflex by now. 6 years of keeping his personal life small enough to fit inside the boundaries he'd drawn for himself and Maisie. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. Something shifted in her face. Not surprise, not triumph, just a kind of relief, like she'd been holding a breath for longer than she'd realized. "I've been trying not to do the same thing," she said. "For the record." "How long?" She looked slightly embarrassed, which was the most human he'd ever seen her look. "Since the gate." He almost laughed. He was holding a flux brush and crouching next to a compromised pipe junction in her basement on a rainy Thursday night. He was wearing a gray t-shirt with a small paint stain near the collar. He had not planned any of this. "That was 6 weeks ago," he said. "I'm aware." He set the brush down. He straightened up. He was close enough to see that her eyes, which he had previously categorized as dark brown, were actually more amber than brown in the lamplight. "I should finish this pipe," he said. "I know. And then I have to pick up Maisie." "I know that too." He held her gaze for another moment. "We should probably talk about this." "Probably," she agreed. Neither of them moved. The rain was really coming down now. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she said. He went back to the pipe. His hands were steady. His brain was doing something else entirely. He finished the repair in another 40 minutes. The solder work was clean. The new section held pressure. He wrapped the insulation foam around the vulnerable run and fixed the bracket and turned the water back on in stages, watching for leaks. Nothing leaked. "It's done," he said, packing up his kit. "Shouldn't give you any more trouble. I'll come back in a week to check the solder joint, just to be sure." "Logan." He stopped. "Thank you." She said it simply, without the layer of professional courtesy she sometimes carried, like she meant more than the pipe and they both knew it. "Yeah," he said. "Anytime." He picked up his bag and went upstairs and out into the rain. He stood on her front steps for a second, looking at the wet street and the yellow light from his own porch across the property line. He was already doing the math. Not the romantic math, the real math. The math that had nothing to do with what he wanted and everything to do with what was real. Maisie, his business, the life he'd spent 6 careful years making stable enough to trust. Victoria Sterling was not a complicated complication in the abstract sense. She was complicated in the specific practical sense of being a 30-year-old billionaire with a life that ran on a scale he could barely conceptualize. And he was a home repair contractor in Richmond who went to bed at 10:30 and made lunch drawings on napkins. He knew how stories like this went. He'd lived one version of it already. The rain soaked through his jacket before he made it to his truck. He sat there for a minute in the wet dark with the engine running and the heater coming on slowly, and then he pulled out his phone and texted Ruth. "On my way to get Maisie. Sorry it ran long." Ruth texted back. "She's on her 4th snickerdoodle. No rush." He pulled out of the driveway. The wipers beat the rain off the windshield in a steady rhythm. He drove to Ruth's house. He picked up his daughter, who fell asleep in the back seat on the 5-minute drive home, still holding her stuffed rabbit, one sock on and one sock inexplicably missing, and he carried her inside and got her to bed without waking her and stood in the hallway for a moment looking at the glow of her nightlight under the door. This was the life he'd built. This was the thing worth protecting. He went downstairs. He cleaned up the kitchen. He sat at the table with a glass of water and his phone and thought about the specific quality of the silence in Victoria Sterling's basement. The rain on the windows. The way she'd said, "Are you trying not to kiss me?" Not coy, not performing anything, just asking a real question and expecting a real answer. He had given her one. He didn't know yet whether that had been a mistake or the first honest thing he'd done in months. He put his phone face down on the table and went to bed. He didn't sleep for a long time. Outside, the rain kept coming, and next door the lights in the Sterling mansion stayed on past midnight, which he didn't know because he was in his own house, in his own bed, staring at his own ceiling. But the lights stayed on, and in the morning they would both have to figure out what came next. He made her coffee. That was the thing Logan kept coming back to the next morning while he stood in his kitchen at 6:45, measuring grounds into the filter with the kind of mechanical focus he usually reserved for calculating load-bearing calculations. He made her coffee in his head. Not literally, he wasn't going next door at 6:45, but he was thinking about how he took his and how she'd somehow already known, and whether that meant something or whether he was the kind of man who read meaning into cream and coffee because he was 48 hours away from kissing a woman in a basement and hadn't slept properly since. Maisie came downstairs in her pajamas with one sock still missing from the night before and sat at the kitchen table and looked at him. "You look weird," she said. "Good morning to you too. Your face looks like when you're thinking too hard about something." "I'm thinking about coffee." Dad, you've been making coffee for like 100 years. He put her cereal in front of her. She ate it with the focused efficiency of someone who had things to do, which at 7 years old meant she had approximately 23 minutes before the bus came and at least one important thing she hadn't told him yet. Victoria's nice, Maisie said without looking up from her bowl. Logan sat down across from her. Yeah? She asked real questions about Amberfall, not like fake questions where you can tell they don't actually care. I noticed that. Maisie looked up. Is she your friend? She's the neighbor. That's not what I asked. Logan looked at his daughter, who was 7 years old and already cross-examining him with the precision of someone twice her age, and he thought, you are going to be absolutely exhausting when you're a teenager, and I cannot wait. I don't know yet, he said honestly. We're figuring it out. Maisie seemed to find this acceptable. She went back to her cereal. She has really good posture, she said. Ruth says that means confidence. Ruth says a lot of things. Ruth is usually right, though. He couldn't argue with that. He got up and made Maisie's lunch. Then, Victoria texted him at 9:17 while he was pulling into a job site in the Fan District. I made coffee. There's extra if you want it. No pressure. He sat in the truck for a moment, engine running. I have a job this morning, he wrote back. Tonight? 3 dots. Then, I have a board call at 7. After? I'll come by at 8:30. He put the phone in his pocket and went to work. He did not think about it for the rest of the morning, except for approximately every 20 minutes. The day was long in the way days get when you're waiting for evening. He finished the deck extension measurement in the Fan, drove to a supplier in Short Pump to pick up materials for next week's bathroom project, stopped at the grocery store because Maisie needed juice boxes, and he was almost out of coffee, which struck him as mildly funny in a way he didn't examine too closely, and picked her up from school at 3:15. Maisie had opinions about dinner. She wanted spaghetti. He made spaghetti, which she then ate approximately half of before declaring herself full, which was a consistent pattern he had long since stopped fighting. He helped her with her reading homework, which she didn't need help with but liked company for, and got her through the bath and into bed by 8, which was 12 minutes earlier than usual, and which Maisie noted with suspicion. Why are you rushing? She asked from under her covers. I'm not rushing. 8 o'clock is your bedtime. It's 7:58. Maisie. I'm just saying. He kissed her forehead. He turned off the main light and left the nightlight on and pulled her door mostly shut and stood in the hallway for a second with his hand on the door frame. Then he went next door. Victoria answered in a different sweater than last night, darker, navy, with the sleeves pushed up. She had a glass of wine. She looked like someone who had spent an hour on a board call and come out the other side slightly worse for it. How was the call? Logan asked. Fine, productive, come in. He had been inside the house twice now, both times in professional contexts, and it looked different at 8:30 at night with lamps on and her work papers spread across the kitchen island and a half-finished bottle of wine on the counter. It looked more like a place someone actually lived. Do you want wine? I have beer. I bought it. She stopped. I bought it last week and I don't really drink beer, so I suspect I bought it for no real reason. I'll take a beer. She got it from the fridge and handed it to him, and they both stood at the kitchen island in the way that people stand when they have something to say and haven't figured out how to start. I've been thinking, Logan said, so have I. About last night. Yes. What you said. What I asked, she corrected, with a slight emphasis that suggested she thought the distinction mattered. Right. He turned the bottle in his hand. I meant what I said. I know. She looked at him steadily. So did I. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the November night had gotten cold enough to see breath. I want to be straight with you, Logan said, because I think you're someone who prefers that. I am. I like you. That's clear, I think, at this point. But I have a kid and a business that I'm still building, and I put a lot of years into making my life stable enough to trust. And I'm not saying any of that to back away from something. I'm saying it because I think you should know what you're walking into before you walk into it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone being careful with words. The silence of someone actually listening. That's fair, she said. I'm not a complicated situation, but I'm not a simple one either. Logan, she set her wine down, I ran a company for 7 years. I negotiated a $40 million acquisition at 26. I don't scare easy. A pause. But I appreciate you saying it. Something loosened in his chest that he hadn't known was tight. What about you? He asked. What do I need to know? She laughed, short and a little rueful. I work too much. I have a hard time turning my brain off. My ex used to say living with me was like living with someone who was always in a meeting, even when she was home. She picked up her wine again. He wasn't wrong. Past tense. Definitely past tense. She looked at him. But the habit isn't. I'm still working on it. That's honest. You said you prefer it. I do. They stood there with their drinks in the warm light of her kitchen, and the whole weight of what they were circling sat between them with the patience of something that was going to have to be dealt with one way or another. So what do we do? Victoria asked. I think, Logan said slowly, we take it slow. And we're honest when something's not working. And we don't make any promises that either of us can't keep. She nodded. It was not a romantic answer. It was not the kind of thing someone said in a movie. He watched her to see if she was disappointed. She didn't look disappointed. She looked relieved, which surprised him and shouldn't have. Okay, she said. Okay? She refilled her wine. He drank his beer. They moved to the living room, which was mostly furnished now. A long gray sofa, a low coffee table, bookshelves that were only partially filled because she'd ordered more books than had arrived yet, she explained, which he found for some reason amusing. You ordered books in advance of having shelves to put them on? I ordered the shelves and the books simultaneously. The shelves came first. There was a shipping delay. How many books? She looked slightly self-conscious. A lot? How many is a lot? I have a list. Victoria. 112, she said. But several of those are reference books for work, which is a legitimate professional expense. So it's not as excessive as it sounds. He laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came up before he could decide whether to let it. She looked pleased with herself for causing it. They talked until almost 11, which was later than he'd been up on a weeknight and longer than he could remember. They talked about her company and his business, and Maisie and the neighborhood, and the book list, and the proper way to fix a plaster wall, which she had opinions about that were mostly wrong, but interestingly wrong. They did not talk about kissing because they'd already talked about everything that kissing meant, and sometimes that was enough for one night. When he got up to leave, she walked him to the door. He stood on her front step. The night was very cold and very clear. Logan, she said. Yeah. I'm glad you came tonight. Me too. He went home. He went to bed at 11:15, which was still later than he wanted, but considerably better than the night before, and he slept through to the alarm for the first time in days. The weeks that followed were the best and most quietly terrifying weeks Logan had spent in years. Not because anything went wrong, because everything went right, which was its own specific kind of terrifying when you had trained yourself to expect the failure point. They had dinner twice, the four of them, Logan and Maisie and Victoria, and sometimes Ruth, who had appointed herself an unofficial participant in whatever this was. Victoria learned that Maisie would eat exactly 3 foods without complaint, and would try a 4th if you didn't make a big deal of introducing it. Logan learned that Victoria stress-organized her kitchen when a meeting went badly, which he found out by arriving one Thursday evening to find her alphabetizing her spice cabinet with the focused intensity of someone diffusing something. Hard day? He asked. The Vancouver project is 6 weeks behind schedule, and my project lead quit this morning. I'm sorry. I reorganized the pantry first. The spices are next. She didn't look up. It helps me think. Okay. He pulled out a stool and sat at the island. Tell me about the Vancouver project. She stopped alphabetizing. She turned around. You want to hear about a commercial design project? I want to hear about your day. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he was starting to learn, the one she wore when something had surprised her and she hadn't decided yet how to feel about being surprised. Then she told him about the Vancouver project, and he listened, and he didn't understand most of the specifics, but he understood the frustration underneath them, and he asked the right questions. And by the time she got to the end of it, the spices were still only at the F's. and she looked considerably less like someone who might reorganize the entire house before midnight. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't do anything." "You let me talk." She said it simply, like it was a normal thing to acknowledge, which he supposed it should have been. Marcus, my ex, he used to get a particular look when I talked about work for more than 10 minutes, like he was being polite about something he'd stopped finding interesting. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. "That sounds exhausting." It was. She picked up the paprika. "I got good at editing myself, which is its own kind of exhausting." He understood that one personally. "I don't need you to edit yourself," he said. She set the paprika down. She looked at him across the kitchen island, and something moved through her expression that was complicated and real, and not entirely happy, the way most real things weren't. "I know," she said quietly. "That's what scares me a little." The kiss happened on a Friday night in late November, approximately 3 weeks after the basement question, because apparently that was the pace at which Logan Whitaker allowed himself to want things, deliberately, with advanced consideration, which drove him slightly crazy in retrospect. Maisie was at her mother's for the weekend. It was the second-to-last sentence Logan had typed when he texted Victoria that afternoon, and he was aware as he typed it that he was providing information that didn't need to be in the text, which was its own form of statement. Victoria texted back, "Come for dinner, I'll cook." He arrived at 7 to find that cooking, for Victoria, meant she had ordered in from a restaurant he'd never heard of and transferred everything into actual serving dishes, which she explained without embarrassment as a strategy she'd developed in her mid-20s when she realized she had strong opinions about food and no patience for the learning curve of actually making it. "So you just outsource dinner?" "I source dinner from professionals and present it with intention." She handed him a glass of wine. "It's fundamentally the same as your approach to plumbing." "That's not even slightly the same." "I hire specialists for what I'm not good at. You would too." "I would never try to pass off someone else's pipe repair as my own." "I'm not passing it off as anything. I told you exactly what I did." He was laughing before she finished the sentence. She was smiling at him in the way she had when she caused his laugh, like she'd won something minor and was privately satisfied about it. They ate at her kitchen table with actual plates and candles that he was fairly sure she'd put there in the last hour because they were still in a paper bag in the recycling near the back door. He didn't mention the bag. The candles were nice. They talked through dinner and cleared the table together and ended up side by side at her kitchen sink, her washing, him drying, in the specific domestic rhythm of people who have been carefully circling something long enough that the circling has started to feel like its own kind of intimacy. She handed him a glass to dry. Her hand was damp and warm. Their fingers overlapped for a second around the stem. Neither of them moved away. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." "I'm not asking this time," she said. "I'm just saying that I've been patient for 3 weeks, and I think that's a reasonable amount of patience." He set the glass on the counter. He turned toward her. She was looking at him with that directness she carried everywhere. No performance, no careful arrangement of expression, just exactly what she was thinking offered straight to him. He kissed her. It wasn't the perfect movie version. She made a small surprise sound even though she'd been the one to bring it up. And he had dish soap on his left hand, which he was suddenly very aware of, and the angle was slightly wrong for about half a second before it wasn't. It was a real kiss, with all the awkward human math of two people who'd wanted to do this for too long. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Took you long enough," she said. "I was being careful." I noticed. His hand, the one without dish soap, was at her jaw. She had her hand on his forearm, not pulling him in, just holding on to something. "Victoria," he said. "Don't apologize for waiting," she said. It was good, the waiting." She pulled back enough to see his face. "I just needed you to know it was okay to stop." They did the dishes. They went to the couch. They talked for another 2 hours, which he had not expected, but which in retrospect made complete sense because that was how they worked. The words first, always the words, and everything else built on top of them. He left at 1 in the morning, which was an hour he had not voluntarily been awake at since approximately 2019. The call came on a Monday. Victoria mentioned it on a Wednesday, 3 days later, which told Logan something. That she had spent 3 days deciding how to say it, or whether to say it at all, which was not how she usually handled things. She was in his kitchen when she told him, which was new. She'd started coming over in the evening sometimes instead of the other way around, and Logan was not unaware of what that meant. "I need to tell you something," she said. He set down the dish he was washing and turned the water off, something in her voice. "Okay," he said. "My board met last Friday. They've had a proposal on the table for a while, an international expansion. New European portfolio, flagship properties in 5 cities. It's been in the works for 2 years, and it's gotten to the point where they want an executive in place to run it." Logan leaned against the counter. "They want you. They want me to relocate to Boston, to run the North American hub that coordinates the European expansion." She was watching him carefully. It's a significant offer, financially, strategically. The kind of thing that doesn't come twice." The kitchen was very quiet. "When did they tell you?" he asked. "Last Friday." He nodded slowly. "Before or after you came over Friday night?" A pause. "After." He absorbed that. She had sat in his living room on Friday night and watched a documentary about ocean currents that Maisie had recommended with great enthusiasm and had laughed in the right places and had not said a word about this. "How long would you be in Boston?" he asked. "Permanently. The role is based there." She held his gaze. "I own the Richmond property. I could come back, but the primary residence, the office, it would be Boston." Logan looked at the kitchen window, the backyard, the fence line between their properties that he'd fixed a loose board on 2 weeks ago. "Have you decided?" he said. "I haven't told them yes." "But?" She was quiet. "It's a very good opportunity." He turned back toward her. She looked like someone holding themselves very still, and he understood after a moment that she was waiting for something. His reaction, his response, maybe something specific that he couldn't yet identify. "You should go," he said. Something crossed her face that he couldn't fully read. "Logan, I mean it." He said it carefully, not harshly. "If this is what your career needs, if this is the right move for what you've built, you should go." "You're not going to ask me to stay?" He looked at her for a long moment. "No." She blinked. It was a small movement, but he caught it. "Why not?" she said, and her voice had an edge to it now, something underneath the question that was rawer than the question itself. "Because I know what it looks like when someone gives something up for the wrong reason," he said quietly. "I watched my marriage do that in slow motion. 2 people making smaller and smaller versions of themselves and calling it compromise, until there was nothing left worth compromising for." He held her eyes. "If you stay in Richmond because of me, and 5 years from now you look at your company and know you chose the smaller version of it, I don't want to be the reason for that." Victoria stared at him. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed. "Most people," she said slowly, "would at least ask." "I know." "It would be a fairly normal thing to ask." "I know that too." Her jaw worked slightly, like she was turning something over. "That's either the most selfless thing anyone has ever said to me, or you're ending this very politely." "I'm not ending anything," Logan said. "I'm telling you to take the offer if you want it. Those are different things." She looked at him for a long time with an expression he couldn't file neatly. It was complicated and layered, something between frustration and something that ran deeper than frustration. "I need to think," she said. "Take your time." She left 20 minutes later, not angry, exactly. Too internal for anger. She kissed him at the door, brief and deliberate, and walked back next door with her hands in her coat pockets and her shoulders straight. Logan stood in the doorway and watched her go. He went back inside. He turned the water back on and finished the dishes and put Maisie's lunch together for tomorrow and drew the napkin drawing, a little dog this time because Maisie had requested one, and turned off the kitchen light. He sat at the table for a while in the dark with his phone face down in front of him. He had told her the truth. He was sure of that. He just wasn't sure yet what the truth was going to cost him. She didn't come over Thursday. Logan noticed at 7:30 when he was putting Maisie to bed and heard no movement next door, no lights in the windows he could see from the upstairs hallway. He told himself it meant nothing. She was a busy person with a board decision to make and a company that operated in multiple time zones, and he was not the kind of man who tracked his neighbor's window lights. He checked twice more before he went to bed. Friday was the same. He texted her at noon. Nothing specific, just a photo of a particularly bad drywall patch he'd uncovered on a job site. The kind of thing he'd started sending because she always responded with either a genuine question or a cutting observation, and the responses had become something he looked forward to without meaning to. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji at 3:15. He stared at it for a second. Victoria Sterling did not send thumbs-up emojis. She sent paragraphs. She sent follow-up questions. She once sent him a 4-sentence analysis of why a particular brand of joint compound was inferior to its competition after he'd mentioned it in passing. He put the phone in his pocket and went back to work. Saturday morning, Maisie had a soccer game at 9. Logan packed the folding chair and the bag with the juice boxes and the orange slices, which the team expected because he'd made the mistake of bringing them once and now it was a permanent expectation, and got Maisie into her cleats with only moderate negotiation about whether she needed to wear a jacket over her jersey, which she did. It was 41 degrees, and they drove to the park. He set up his chair on the sideline and watched his daughter run with the ferocious and largely directionless energy that characterized youth soccer, and he was doing fine. He was focused. He was a parent at a soccer game, until he looked to the left and saw Victoria standing 20 feet down the sideline. She was in a dark coat, hands in her pockets, watching the field. She hadn't seen him yet. He got up and walked over before he could think about whether to. She turned when she heard him, and something moved across her face. Relief, maybe, or the attempt to look like it wasn't relief. "I didn't know you were coming," he said. "I didn't either, until about 40 minutes ago." She looked back at the field, where Maisie had just run directly into another player, bounced off, and kept going without breaking stride. "I saw the car was gone. Ruth told me where you were." "Ruth?" He said it without surprise. "She also told me to stop moping and go get some fresh air." That sounds exactly like Ruth. Victoria was quiet for a moment. On the field, Maisie intercepted a pass from the wrong team by accident and then ran it in the correct direction with enormous confidence. And Logan watched it with the private pride of someone who knew she'd had no idea the interception was an error. "I've been thinking," Victoria said. "I figured. I'm not good at sitting with things, unresolved things. I usually know what I want and I move toward it." She paused. "I haven't been sure this week." "About Boston?" "About everything." She turned to look at him. Her face was honest in the cold morning light, a little tired, nothing performed. "You said something the other night that I've been turning over, about people making smaller versions of themselves." "Yeah. Marcus used to tell me I needed to slow down, that I cared too much about the company, that I was too intense about work." She said it flatly, not looking for sympathy. He never said it cruelly. He said it like he was trying to help. But what he was actually saying was that the version of me that existed was too much, and I should try to be a more manageable version. Logan didn't say anything. "And I tried," she said. "For 2 years I tried to be quieter about the things I cared about. I left board meetings early. I stopped taking calls on weekends." She looked back at the field. "And I was miserable. And the business suffered, and he was still not happy, because it turns out the thing that bothered him wasn't the hours. It was that I needed the work in a way he couldn't understand and couldn't compete with. So you ended it." He ended it, actually, which I was relieved about, which told me everything I needed to know about where I was. A whistle blew on the field. Children scattered in new directions. "What I've been trying to figure out," Victoria said, "is whether Boston is actually what I want, or whether I've been saying yes to things for so long that I stopped checking." She turned toward him. "Because that's also something I do. I build toward the next achievement because that's the pattern. That's what got me here. And sometimes I don't stop to ask whether here is where I actually want to be." Logan watched Maisie, who was now arguing good-naturedly with a teammate about something, both of them with their hands on their hips in identical postures. "Do you want to go to Boston?" he asked. "That's the question. What's the answer?" She was quiet long enough that a full passage of play happened on the field in front of them. A near goal, a save, a throw-in. "I don't know," she said finally. And that's the first time in a long time that I don't know what I want, which is uncomfortable. Yeah, Logan said. It is. She looked at him sideways. You could make this easier. How? By asking me to stay. He felt that land in his chest. He kept his eyes on the field. I told you why I won't do that. I know what you told me. Her voice wasn't angry. It was something more complicated than anger. But Logan, you not asking me to stay is also a choice. You understand that? He turned to look at her. I know. It affects what I decide. I know that too. She held his gaze. And you're still not going to ask? Victoria. He said it quietly. If you stay in Richmond and spend the next 5 years wondering what Boston would have been, who does that help? Not me. Not Maisie. Not you. He shook his head slightly. I'd rather you go and know you chose it than stay and spend the rest of the time not choosing it. She stared at him for a long moment. You're a frustrating person, she said. I know. Most people would just say what they want. I want you to stay, he said. I'm being clear about that. I want you to stay, and I want to see what this turns into, and I think it could turn into something real. He held her eyes. But I want you to want that too. On its own, not because you're accommodating me. Something shifted in her expression. Something cracked open a little around the edges, not in a wounded way, but in the way a window opens. She looked back at the field. This is not how I expected this conversation to go, she said. How did you expect it to go? Honestly, I thought you'd either fall apart or tell me it didn't matter either way. A pause. Men have done both. In my experience, I'm not doing either of those. No. She sounded like she was still processing that. You're really not. Maisie scored a goal on the far end of the field. A real one this time, off a clean pass, and the small crowd of parents erupted in the specific unrestrained joy that youth soccer generates. And Logan was on his feet before he knew he'd moved, clapping and yelling her name, and Maisie spun around looking for him and found him immediately, the way she always did, the way she had done since she was 2 years old and could pick his voice out of a room full of noise. She grinned at him across the field. He sat back down. Victoria was watching him. What? He said. Nothing. She looked forward again. You're a good father. I try. No, she said. You actually are. There's a difference. I know people who try very hard and it's still obvious the child is secondary to the inconvenience. She shook her head slightly. She's not secondary. That's clear in everything. Logan didn't know what to do with that. He looked at his hands for a second. She's the whole thing, he said. The rest of it I'm figuring out. Including me? Including you. Victoria nodded slowly. Then, after a moment, can I sit with you instead of standing here like I'm about to deliver a presentation? He picked up his gear bag from the second chair he'd brought without thinking about it. It's why I brought 2 chairs, he said. She looked at the empty chair, then at him. You brought 2 chairs, she said. Force of habit. She sat down. She didn't say anything else about the chairs. He was grateful for that. They watched the rest of the game side by side, close enough that her shoulder was near his but not touching. And the cold came off the field in waves, and Maisie's team lost 3-2, which Maisie handled with the particular resignation of someone who had already decided the real victory was the goal she personally scored. A philosophical position Logan found entirely reasonable. Maisie saw Victoria when she ran off the field. You came, she said, with the uncomplicated delight of a child who does not track adult subtext. I heard there was a game, Victoria said. We lost. I saw your goal, though. That was real. Maisie accepted this assessment as accurate. Did you bring anything? Dad brings orange slices. Maisie, Logan said, I'm asking. There's nothing wrong with asking. I didn't bring orange slices, Victoria said. I'll know for next time. Maisie looked at her thoughtfully. So you're coming to the next one? A brief pause. If that's okay. It's okay with me, Maisie said simply, and then ran off toward her teammates with the implicit understanding that the matter was settled. Boss said, the board's deadline was December 15th. Logan knew this because Victoria told him on a Sunday. sitting at his kitchen table with coffee, while Maisie drew maps in the other room and the radio played low. She'd started appearing in his kitchen on Sunday mornings in a way that had gone unremarked by both of them, the way certain habits establish themselves by repetition before either party decides to name them. 3 weeks, she said. Have you told them anything? That I'm considering. They're not patient people, but they understand that a decision of this scale takes time. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. My CFO called me privately on Friday, off the record. He said the board would accept a no if I said no, but they'd remember it. What does that mean for you? Probably nothing immediate. Long term, hard to say. Influence shifts. Boards have long memories. She looked at the table. And the honest answer is that turning down an opportunity this size is not something I've done before. I've always moved toward the bigger thing. Is bigger always better? In business, usually yes. A pause. In everything else? No. Obviously not. She said it without looking at him, but he knew what she meant. He got up to refill both their coffees. From the other room, Maisie could be heard narrating something to herself under her breath, a running commentary that Logan had learned to tune to a background frequency while still hearing it, the specific monitoring skill of a parent. What does your sister say? He asked. Victoria looked up, slightly surprised. She'd mentioned her sister enough that he'd started to understand she was the person whose opinion Victoria actually trusted above the board, above her senior staff, above most of the structures she'd built around herself. Claire says I already know the answer, and I'm just scared of it. Is she right? Victoria held his gaze. Claire is almost always right, which is deeply annoying. What answer are you scared of? She was quiet for a moment, long enough that he wasn't sure she was going to answer. That I've been building toward things for so long that I forgot to ask whether any of it was actually mine, she said. The goals, the expansion, Boston. Her jaw tightened slightly. I'm very good at wanting things. I'm less good at knowing which things are worth wanting. He sat back down across from her. And Richmond? Richmond is the first place I've lived in 7 years where I've slept past 6 on a Saturday without it feeling like I was wasting something. She said it like she was admitting something minor, but her hands on the coffee cup were not entirely still. That sounds like a small thing. It's not a small thing, Logan said. No, she agreed. It's not. From the other room, Maisie called, Dad, how do you spell archipelago? Logan raised his voice without turning around. Archipelago. A pause. Why does it have that many letters? Because English is irrational. That's what I thought. The narrating resumed. Victoria was looking at him with an expression that was not quite a smile but was close to one. You didn't even hesitate, she said. She asks me words constantly. I've gotten fast. She stopped. That's a specific kind of knowing someone. When you learn what they need before they finish asking for it. He met her eyes across the table. Yeah, he said. It is. The space between the sentence and what it meant sat there between them. Not uncomfortable, just present. Cool. The conversation that mattered happened on a Tuesday night, 11 days before the board's deadline. Logan had been working a long job, a full kitchen renovation in Church Hill that had hit the structural surprise that all kitchen renovations eventually hit, a discovery that the previous owner had at some point removed a wall segment that had been doing more work than anyone appreciated, and 2 days of investigation and recalculation followed before he could move forward. He came home at 6:30 tired in the specific full-body way that meant his brain had been running as hard as his hands all day. Maisie was at a playdate until 8. The house was quiet. He was in the shower when he heard his phone buzz on the bathroom counter. He ignored it. It buzzed again, then a third time. He got out and picked it up. 3 texts from Victoria, sent 5 minutes apart. The first, the board called a meeting for Thursday. The second, they want an answer. The third, can you come over? He got dressed. He went next door. She opened the door before he knocked, which meant she'd heard him coming, which meant she'd been watching for him. And he filed that away alongside everything else he'd been quietly accumulating about her. Her living room had the organized chaos of someone who had been working through something on paper. Her notebook was open on the coffee table, Multiple pages covered in handwriting, a pen uncapped beside it. She always worked things out in longhand when they mattered. He'd learned that. They want a decision Thursday, she said. What are you going to tell them? She turned and looked at him straight on. Her eyes were tired and clear at the same time. I've been sitting here for 3 hours writing out reasons for and against, and both lists are long and neither of them is telling me anything I don't already know. Then what's the actual question? The actual question... She stopped. She ran a hand through her hair. The actual question is whether I'm choosing Boston because I want Boston, or because going has always been what I do when things get complicated. Her voice was quiet and precise, the way it got when she was saying something she'd worked to articulate, running toward the next achievement as a substitute for dealing with the thing in front of me. He was standing in the middle of her living room. She was on the other side of the coffee table, arms crossed, not in defensiveness, but in the way of someone trying to hold themselves together at a reasonable temperature. "And what's the thing in front of you?" he asked. "You." She said it without flinching. "And Maisie, and a life that I have not allowed myself to believe I could actually have, because every time I've tried to have it before, I've been too much for it." Her voice caught slightly on the last sentence, not dramatically, just the small physical evidence of something that cost something to say. Logan crossed the room. He stopped in front of her. He didn't touch her, not yet. He looked at her the way he had in the basement weeks ago, like she was the only direction that made sense. "You're not too much," he said. "Logan, you're not. You're exactly what you are. That's not a problem to manage. It's just you." He said it plainly. "You work hard and you think fast and you have opinions about joint compound and you alphabetize things when you're stressed and you sit on my kid's chalk kingdom like it's a normal thing to do on a Saturday afternoon. None of that is too much. None of it." Her chin moved slightly. Not quite a tremor, but the precursor to one. "I'm not telling you to stay," he said. "I need you to understand I mean that. But I also need you to understand that whatever you decide, it shouldn't be because you think you're too big for this life. Because you're not. You fit here." She looked at him for a long time. "How do you do that?" she said. "Do what?" "Say the thing that's true without making it about what you want." "I told you what I want," he said. "I told you at the soccer game. I'm not hiding it." "I know." She uncrossed her arms. She put a hand on his chest, flat, just resting there. He could feel the warmth of it through his shirt. "I know you did." He put his hand over hers. The room was very quiet. "What are you going to tell them Thursday?" he asked. She took a slow breath. "I don't know yet." Her hand pressed slightly against his chest. "But I think I've been asking myself the wrong question all week." "What's the right one?" She looked up at him. Not Boston or Richmond, not ambition or this. A gesture that encompassed the room, the distance to his house, everything unnamed. "The right question is whether Boston is actually what I want anymore, or whether I want it because I haven't examined the habit of wanting it." He was quiet, letting it be hers. "I built this company from nothing," she said. "I don't need a multi-billion-dollar expansion to prove it's real. I've known that since about week 3 of negotiations, and I kept pushing anyway because stopping felt like losing." She looked at their hands. "I'm tired of moving forward just to avoid standing still." "What does standing still look like, what?" he asked. She looked around her living room, at the half-filled bookshelves, at her notebook on the coffee table, at the window that faced, on its angle, the direction of his house. "This," she said simply. "I think it looks like this." He kissed her. She leaned into it with the weight of someone who'd been holding a breath for a long time and had finally decided to let it go. When they broke apart, she stayed close, her forehead tipped toward his. "I'm still scared," she said. "Of what?" "That I'll want something and it won't stay. That I'll build toward it and it'll move." She said it quietly. "I'm not good at things that could leave." He thought of Renee, of the specific silence after, of Maisie in the hallway with her rabbit, of all the things that leave anyway, no matter how well you've prepared yourself. "Nobody is," he said. "That's not a flaw in you. That's just being a person." She laughed, a small, tired laugh. "I've been trying to engineer my way out of being a person for most of my career." "How's that going?" "Terrible," she said. Really terrible. He held her for a while in the quiet of her living room, with her notebook open on the coffee table and the uncapped pen beside it, and all the reasons she'd been writing down for 3 hours waiting on the page. She didn't need the list anymore. He could tell. She still had to decide. That part was hers. But the question underneath the question, the one she'd been afraid to ask, had already answered itself in the way real answers usually did. Not with certainty, but with the specific absence of the fear that had been there before. He went home at 10:30. He lay in bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about Thursday, about a board of people in a room somewhere deciding the shape of the next several years, about how little any of that was in his hands. He was good at building things. He was good at fixing things that broke. He was considerably less practiced at waiting to find out whether the thing he'd started to count on was going to stay put. He turned onto his side. The house was quiet. Maisie breathed in the next room with the complete unconscious peace of someone who had not yet learned to worry about the future. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep for a long time. Thursday came the way difficult days always did. Ordinary on the surface, the alarm going off at the same time, the coffee maker running its same cycle, Maisie needing her left shoe located with some urgency before the bus arrived. Logan found the shoe under the couch. He made the lunch. He drew a small elephant on the napkin because Maisie had recently declared elephants to be her favorite animal, a position she'd held for approximately 3 weeks and would likely revise without notice. He stood on the porch and watched the bus pull away, and then stood there a moment longer than necessary in the cold morning, looking at the lights in Victoria's windows. She'd texted him at 6:42, board call at 9, I'll let you know. He texted back, okay? Then, after a pause, you know what you want to say. 3 dots appeared, then they stopped. Then, working on believing that. He put the phone in his pocket and drove to the Churchill kitchen renovation, which was at a stage requiring his full attention and which he was grateful for. The structural issue had been resolved, which meant today was framing and measurement, the kind of work that demanded enough precision to crowd out most other thoughts. He lasted until 10:40 before he checked his phone. Nothing from Victoria. He put it back, picked up his measuring tape, got back to work. At 11:17, his phone buzzed. It's done. Can we talk tonight? He read it 3 times. The message told him nothing and everything simultaneously. It was done? She'd said something, but not what. He typed back, I'll come by at 7. Then he put the phone face down on the subfloor and finished measuring the cabinet run and did not pick it up again until lunch. The day had the specific quality of a day that refuses to move at normal speed. He finished at the job site by 5, stopped for groceries, made Maisie dinner, pasta again, because some battles were not worth fighting on a Thursday, helped with homework, ran a bath, got her to bed by 7:45 with a compromise that she could read for 20 minutes with her lamp on, which she agreed to with the magnanimous air of someone granting a favor. He knocked on Victoria's door at 7:50. She opened it immediately, which again meant she'd been listening for him, and he noticed again without saying anything. She looked different from the last few weeks, not lighter exactly, more settled, like something that had been running at high tension had come down a few degrees. She was in her usual evening clothes, dark sweater, bare feet on the hardwood, and she had a glass of wine and a second glass waiting on the coffee table, which meant she'd thought this through enough to pour ahead of time. Sit down, she said. Not anxious, just direct. He sat on the couch. She sat in the chair across from him, which was a different configuration than usual. They typically ended up side by side, and he understood she needed to look at him while she said this. I told them no, she said. The room was quiet. To Boston, he said, to be sure. To the relocation. She held his eyes steadily. But not to the expansion. He waited. I spent 2 hours on the call this morning. She curled one leg underneath her in the chair. I let them make their full case. The numbers, the timeline, the market opportunity, all of it. And then I told them I wasn't relocating to Boston, and I gave them the alternative. Which is? I run the expansion from Richmond, travel to Boston monthly, to the European properties quarterly. I maintain creative and strategic oversight without establishing a permanent presence in Boston. She picked up her wine. I told them I'd accept a modest reduction in the performance bonus structure tied to the role since I'm not physically embedded there, and that I'd commit to a full review of the arrangement at 18 months. Logan thought about this. And they agreed? Not immediately. A slight smile, not triumphant. More like she was remembering a difficult thing she'd come through. Elliot, my CFO, the one who called me off the record last week, he pushed back first. Said the whole premise of the role was physical presence in the hub city. That remote leadership of an expansion of this scale was untested within the company. What did you say? I told him the whole premise of my company was untested when I started it. She set her glass down. And then I told them that I could find the right person to be physically based in Boston, someone I trusted to execute the day-to-day while I maintained strategic control. That I'd been thinking about promoting my current operations director, Nina Reyes, who has been ready for an expanded role for 2 years and who would be considerably better at the Boston operational piece than I would be. Is that true? Completely true. I've been avoiding promoting her because it would mean letting go of a layer of control I've been holding onto for no good reason. She said it without self-pity, just the flat acknowledgement of someone who knows her own patterns. The board said they'd need 24 hours to consult and regroup. They called back at 2:15. And? They said yes. She paused. With conditions. Nina's promotion has to go to a board vote, which is standard. The quarterly review at 18 months is firm, and I have to attend the Boston kickoff in person for the first 6 weeks of the expansion launch. 6 weeks in Boston. 6 weeks. Not 6 months, not permanently. She held his gaze. Logan, I have 11 properties in 6 cities, and I travel constantly for the business. 6 weeks is not the same as relocating. I know that. I just wanted to be clear. You're always clear, he said. It's one of your better qualities. Something loosened in her face. One of? I'll send you a ranked list. She laughed, which was what he'd wanted. She picked up her wine again, and he picked up his, and they sat across from each other in the lamplight of her living room with the relief in the air that comes after a hard thing is decided and before the next hard thing makes itself known. Can I ask you something? Logan said. Always. Was any part of this decision about me? Be honest. She considered it properly, which he appreciated. She didn't rush to reassure him. Yes, she said. Part of it, but not the way you're worried about. She turned the wine glass slowly. You're not the reason I said no to Boston. The reason I said no to Boston is that I don't actually want to live in Boston. I've known that for longer than I wanted to admit. She looked at him. But you're the reason I stopped and asked the question instead of just going because going was the next thing on the list. That's a distinction. It's an important one. She leaned forward slightly. I'm not staying here because of you. I'm staying here because this is where I want to be. You're part of what's here. The good part of what's here. He nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? She repeated. That's your response? What would you prefer? Something more than okay. Victoria. He set his glass down. I've been sitting on this all day. I'm not going to perform a bigger reaction than I have. What I have is relief, genuine relief. And I'm glad you told them what you actually wanted instead of what you'd previously agreed to want. She looked at him for a moment. You're a very unusual person. You've mentioned. I mean it as a compliment. I know. She got up from the chair and came to sit beside him on the couch, close, her shoulder against his, and he felt the specific ease of that. The way proximity had become a comfortable thing rather than a charged one, which was its own quiet form of something good. My sister called it 3, Victoria said. After the board confirmed. What did Claire say? She said, and I'm quoting directly, finally, you made a decision because you wanted to instead of because you thought you should. She paused. Then she said, tell me about the contractor, which took an additional 40 minutes. Logan stared at the middle distance. Do I want to know what you told her? I told her you were competent and occasionally infuriating. That's fair. And that you made me coffee before I knew how I took it, and that you carried 2 chairs to a soccer game, and that you told me to go to Boston even though you didn't want me to go, and that you say what's true even when it's inconvenient." She said it without looking at him, in the tone of someone recounting a thing rather than confessing it. She was quiet for a while after that. What did she say? She said, "That sounds like someone worth not going to Boston for." He was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like a smart woman." "She's unbearable," Victoria said. "I adore her." The permanent pipe repair happened on a Saturday, 8 days after the board call. It was Logan's idea, which Victoria found slightly amusing when he brought it up over coffee on Friday morning. The repair he'd done in November, the cut and replace section, the soldered joint, was solid and would hold for years under normal conditions. But there was a secondary run further along the basement wall that he'd flagged during the original assessment and not gotten back to. A section with the same corrosion pattern, slower developing but present. "I should have done it in November," he said. "I was going to schedule it, and then things got complicated." "They did get complicated," she agreed. "Saturday?" "Saturday." He arrived at 9 with his full kit and a newer length of copper pipe, and spent 2 hours in her basement doing what he should have done 2 months ago, which was finish the job properly. Victoria brought coffee down at 10 and sat on the same overturned plastic crate as before, in approximately the same position, and the rain was not falling this time, but the basement had the same cold and the same quality of contained space. "This is where it started," she said. "Technically, it started at the gate. The gate was the beginning of something. This is where it got real." He looked over at her. She was turning her coffee cup in both hands, looking at the wall where the original repair ran. "Are you going to be sentimental about my plumbing?" he said. "I'm not sentimental. I'm observational. There's a thin line." "I'm aware of where the line is, Logan." He went back to work. She stayed on the crate. The space between them had the quality of a place where a specific memory lived, and they were both in it without needing to say so. "This pipe is going to outlast us," she said after a while. "Properly done copper like this, 60, 70 years. If nobody touches the solder joint." "Assuming nobody touches it." "Assuming that," he agreed. He completed the flux application and got the torch positioned, which means you'll have passed this house on to someone else, and they'll have passed it on, and none of them will know that this particular section of pipe was replaced on a Saturday morning in December. "That's either comforting or deeply depressing," she said. "I vote comforting." "On what basis?" "The work holds whether or not anyone knows who did it." He applied the solder. The joint took clean. "That's kind of the whole point." She was quiet. He watched the joint set. "The expansion kicks off in March," she said. "I'll be in Boston for 6 weeks starting March 3rd. "I know. Maisie's spring break is the last week of March." He looked up from the pipe. She was looking at the wall. "It's a reasonable time to visit Boston," she said, not looking at him. "If someone wanted to bring a 7-year-old who might enjoy the harbor and the science museum and the general historical saturation of the city." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you inviting us to Boston?" "I'm observing that Boston has things a 7-year-old might enjoy during spring break." "Victoria." She finally looked at him. "I'm inviting you to Boston." "Okay," he said. "That's it? Okay?" "You said you wanted more than okay last time and then argued with me about it. I'm trying a different approach." She pressed her lips together over something that was fighting to be a smile. "The approach needs work. Yes or no?" "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." He turned back to the pipe. "Then, okay stands." She threw a small piece of packing foam at him. He caught it without turning around, which he was unreasonably pleased about. The first real date, official, named, with the explicit understanding that it was a date, happened on a Friday evening 2 weeks before Christmas. Logan had made a reservation, which he'd never done for himself in years and had therefore slightly overthought. He'd asked Ruth for a recommendation, which was a choice he made peace with because Ruth knew every restaurant in Richmond with the intimate knowledge of someone who had been eating out in the same city for 40 years and had strong opinions about all of it. Ruth gave him 3 options ranked by occasion type and told him the middle one was the right choice, with a certainty that he trusted more than his own judgment on this particular subject. He told Victoria Friday, 6 o'clock, wear whatever she wanted. She had shown up in a dark green dress he'd never seen before, and boots and her hair down, and he had stood in his doorway for approximately 1 second too long. You're going to have to stop doing that, she said. Doing what? The thing where you look at me like you're calculating something. I wasn't calculating anything. You absolutely were. He got his jacket. They drove to the restaurant, which was a small Italian place in the museum district that had been there since the 80s and had the specific character of a room that did not care about trends. Exposed brick, red wine on every table, lighting that took the question of ambiance seriously. Ruth had been correct. It was the right choice. They ordered without the elaborate negotiation that sometimes burdened early dates. They both knew what they wanted. They'd been talking every day for 3 months. The formality of the setting was the only new thing, and it fell away quickly enough. I want to ask you something, Victoria said over the pasta. Go ahead. The marriage, Renee. She held his eyes. What do you actually think went wrong? It was not a small question for a first date. For most people, he would have deflected or given the answer he'd rehearsed over years of being asked a version of it. The civil, edited version that moved past it quickly. But Victoria was not most people, and she wasn't asking to pry. She was asking because she needed to know what kind of man he actually was, and he understood that. I think we got married because we were 25, and it was the next thing, he said. And I think we had Maisie because we loved each other, and we did, genuinely, for a long time. But I think we were also both people who were still figuring out who we were, and by the time we'd figured it out, the versions of ourselves that emerged didn't fit together anymore. No villain, she said. No villain. We were just wrong for each other by the time we were old enough to know what right would feel like. Do you regret it? Maisie exists, he said. So no, not even a little. She nodded. That's a clean answer. It's the true one. He turned his wine glass. What about Marcus? Do you have a clean answer? I have a clean answer and an honest answer, she said. The clean answer is that we wanted different things. The honest answer is that I stayed 2 years longer than I should have because I didn't want to be the one who walked away from a good person. He was a good person? He's a perfectly decent person. He just needed someone who was content with a smaller life. And I kept trying to become that person for him, and failing, and feeling like the failure was mine. She shook her head. It took me a long time to understand that not fitting in a space doesn't mean you're too big. Sometimes the space is just the wrong size. Logan thought about that. Did you ever tell him that? Not in those words. She looked at her plate for a moment. I should have. It would have been kinder than the version where I kept apologizing for being who I am. You don't do that anymore, he said. Apologize for it. Not with you. She looked up. Which is new and takes some getting used to. Is it working? She tilted her head slightly. Ask me again in a year. He smiled. I plan to. She held his gaze across the table for a moment, and there was something in the look that was different from all the looks that had come before it. Not the careful watchfulness of someone protecting something, not the deliberate steadiness of someone making a point. Just her, looking at him, without the architecture of defense that she usually carried. He thought, there it is. That's the real one. He thought it and didn't say it. Some things were better held for a while. They split a tiramisu that neither of them technically needed, and argued mildly about whether the espresso in it was too strong, a disagreement that resolved itself in a draw, and they walked to the car in the December cold with her hand in his and their breath making small clouds in the air. He drove home through the lit-up December streets, one hand on the wheel, and she had her head turned toward the window watching the city go by, and the radio was low, and it was a simple thing, a man and a woman driving home after dinner, and the simplicity of it was almost disorienting. He had forgotten that good things could be simple. Ruth threw a neighborhood Christmas party on the 22nd, the way she did every year, and Logan arrived with Maisie and a bottle of wine, and the awareness that Victoria was coming on her own because they'd agreed to arrive separately on the grounds that they were both adults, who didn't need to walk into a party holding hands to make a point. They lasted approximately 12 minutes before Maisie wandered over to Victoria the moment she walked in and pulled her toward the dessert table with an urgency that left no room for the plan. Ruth caught Logan watching them from across the room. You look happy, Ruth said. I look normal, Logan said. Those are the same thing with you. She patted his arm with the authority of someone who had watched him navigate the last 3 years from a front row seat. She's good for you. Ruth. I'm just providing information. You always say that. And I'm always right. She refilled his wine without being asked. Also, she fixed the light fixture in my hallway without mentioning it, just noticed it was flickering and asked if she could look at it and fixed it. That's a person with good instincts. Logan looked at her. She fixed your light fixture last Tuesday while you were at work. He looked back across the room where Victoria was listening to Maisie with the focused attention she always gave her, head slightly down to Maisie's level, and Maisie was explaining something elaborate, one hand moving to demonstrate scale. She didn't tell me that, he said. No, Ruth said. She wouldn't. A pause. That's how you know. He looked at his wine. He looked back at the two of them at the dessert table. He thought about the gate hinge, the first thing, the $3 in lag screws and anchor. He thought about the basement and the pipe, and the specific sound of rain on the windows of a room where something honest got said. He thought about 2 chairs at a soccer game and a light fixture in Ruth's hallway that he hadn't known about until just now. He thought, this is how it happens. Not in the large declared moments, in the accumulated small ones, the ones that happen when nobody's watching, that add up to something before you've noticed you were building anything. Across the room, Maisie finished her explanation and held up a Christmas cookie shaped like a star and showed it to Victoria like it was evidence of something. Victoria took it, looked at it seriously, and nodded once in a way that indicated she found the evidence compelling. Maisie beamed. Logan watched and felt something shift in his chest that he didn't immediately have a word for. Not happiness exactly, or not just that. Something quieter and more durable. The specific feeling of a man who has spent years making something stable enough to trust and is standing inside it and knows it. He took a drink of his wine. He crossed the room toward them. She's explaining the star's significance to the Amberfall mythology, he said when he reached them. It's the symbol of the first queen, Maisie confirmed. It has 12 points. Victoria counted. I did count, Victoria confirmed. 12. 12 is the sacred number in Amberfall, Maisie said to Logan, as if this was something he should have already known. I did not know that, Logan said. Maisie looked at him with patient tolerance. I told you that, Dad. Last month. I believe you, he said. I clearly wasn't paying enough attention. That's okay, Maisie said generously. Victoria pays attention. Victoria looked at him over Maisie's head with an expression that was 17 different things at once, most of them warm, and he looked back at her with approximately the same expression, and neither of them said anything because they didn't need to. Maisie had already moved on to the next cookie. The fence between their properties had a loose board on the south end that Logan had fixed in November, and that worked itself loose again in January, which he attributed to the cold contracting the wood, and which he fixed a second time with longer screws and exterior wood glue, and which worked itself loose a third time in February, in a way that suggested the post itself was the problem and not the board. He mentioned it to Victoria on a Tuesday morning. The post is rotting at the base, he said. Whoever installed this fence used untreated lumber and ground contact, which is not the choice I would have made. How bad? 3 posts on this run are compromised. Maybe 4. He tapped the post with his boot, and it gave slightly, which was not what a fence post should do. The whole south section needs to come out and be redone. Victoria looked at the fence, then at the yard on her side, then back at him. What if we didn't replace it? He looked at her. What? The fence. She gestured along the run. It's on the property line. If we took it out, the yards would connect. She paused. I've been thinking about putting in a garden on this side. There's good afternoon light along this stretch, but it's a narrow run between the fence and the house. Logan looked at the space she was indicating. She was right about the light. She was also right that the strip was too narrow to do anything meaningful with. A shared garden, he said. A shared space. We could define it differently on each end if you want. But the fence is rotting, and I don't particularly care about the fence. She shrugged. Do you care about the fence? He looked at the loose board, the compromised post, the strip of good afternoon light being blocked by a structure that had been installed badly 20 years ago and was now failing on schedule. I don't care about the fence, he said. They took it down on a Saturday in late February, the two of them and Maisie, who treated the project with the seriousness of someone participating in something historically significant. Logan pulled posts and stacked boards, and Maisie carried pieces to the pile with enormous commitment, and Victoria moved along the line with a garden spade marking where she wanted to turn the first beds. By afternoon, the south run was open. The 2 yards breathed into each other in a way that immediately looked right, the way rearranged furniture sometimes reveals that the room was always meant to be that way. Maisie stood in the middle of the merged space and turned a full circle with her arms out. "It's bigger," she said, as if reporting a discovery. "That's generally what happens when you remove a wall," Victoria said. "It's not a wall." "Conceptually, it's a wall." Maisie considered this. "Okay," she said, "then conceptually it's bigger." Logan looked at the two of them. Victoria was leaning on the garden spade with dirt on her jeans and a smudge on her forearm, squinting into the afternoon light, and Maisie was beside her doing the same squint in the same direction, and neither of them was aware of how they looked standing there, which was the only reason he let himself look for as long as he did. He picked up the next post. He got back to work. Boston happened in March the way Victoria had said it would. She left on a Sunday with 2 suitcases and a rolling bag of work materials and her laptop case and a tote bag she'd added at the last minute that Logan was fairly certain contained at least 30 books from the list that still wasn't complete. He drove her to the airport because she'd planned to take a car service, and he'd arrived at 8 in the morning with coffee and said he was taking her, and she'd looked at him for a half second and said, "Okay." Maisie was in the back seat in her pajamas because it was 8 in the morning and she had insisted on coming despite the hour. "You have to call when you land," Maisie told Victoria at the drop-off curb. "I'll text your dad. And me. I have a phone." This was a recent development, a small prepaid device for school emergencies that Maisie treated as a fundamental shift in her social status. "I'll text you too," Victoria said. "Every day?" "Maisie," Logan said, "I'm asking because I want to know." Victoria crouched down to Maisie's level. She did it unselfconsciously, in the same way she'd sat on the chalk driveway in September to hear about Amberfall, without calculation, without the faint condescension adults sometimes carried toward children without meaning to. "Not every day," she said. "I'm going to be very busy, but when something happens that I think you'd want to know about, I'll tell you, and you can text me any time." Maisie thought about this. "Okay," she said, "but text back. Some adults don't text back." "I text back," Victoria said. "It's one of my better qualities." She stood up and looked at Logan. He picked up the rolling bag and set it on the curb beside the suitcases, and they stood in the drop-off lane with cars moving past and the airport noise around them, and she put a hand on his chest in the way she sometimes did, flat, warm, just resting there. "6 weeks," she said. "6 weeks," he said. "I'll be back April 14th. "I know." She kissed him, brief, real, not performing anything for anyone. Then she picked up her bag and went through the doors, and Logan stood at the curb for a moment before getting back in the car, where Maisie was watching him from the back seat with an expression she was trying to make neutral, and failing. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "Drive." He drove. In the rearview mirror, he could see her looking out the window at the airport entrance, and the expression on her face was not the neutral one she'd been attempting, but something more honest. The face of a kid who had started to count on someone and was doing the quiet math of 6 weeks. He understood that math. He was doing it too. The 6 weeks were not the hardest 6 weeks of Logan's life. That bar was set considerably higher and by considerably worse circumstances. But they had a texture to them that he hadn't expected. A mild, persistent awareness, like a sound you can't locate, present in the background of ordinary days. They video called on Sunday nights, the 3 of them when Maisie was around, the 2 of them after she went to bed. Victoria's Boston apartment was a furnished corporate rental that she described as aggressively beige, and that Logan could see behind her during calls, confirming the diagnosis. She had put books on the shelves within 48 hours, which improved it. "How's Nina settling in?" he asked on the second Sunday. "Better than I expected," Victoria said, which from her was a significant review. "She's going to be good at this. Possibly better than I would have been." She said it without visible difficulty, which he noticed. 3 months ago, she might have qualified it. She asked different questions than I do. Less about vision, more about execution, which is what the Boston operation actually needs. "Does that bother you?" She thought about it. It would have a year ago. A pause. Now, it mostly just feels like the right person being in the right place. He thought about what it cost to mean that, for someone who had built what she built by being the one who did everything herself. That's growth, he said. That's exhaustion, she said. At some point you stop needing to be in every room. Same thing, maybe. She looked at him through the screen. You're doing the thing where you say something true and make it sound like nothing. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. She pulled her knees to her chest on the beige couch. Tell me about the Church Hill Project. He told her about the Church Hill Project. She listened with this quality of attention that had stopped surprising him, but that he still noticed, present, following, asking about details that mattered. He'd learned months ago that she'd retained virtually everything he'd ever told her about his work. She could reference a job from October in a December conversation without a prompt. He didn't know whether she did it deliberately or whether it was simply how she operated, and he'd decided it didn't matter. Maisie texted Victoria approximately every other day, which was above the stated expectation, and which Victoria matched with reliable consistency. The texts were largely about Amberfall. There had been, apparently, a significant political development involving the second queen that required documentation. And Logan only knew the content because Maisie occasionally read them aloud at dinner with the tone of someone briefing a colleague. Victoria says the second queen should have a symbol too, Maisie reported one Thursday. She sent me 3 options. Logan looked up from the stove. She designed options? She sketched them. They're on my phone. Maisie showed him the screen. 3 small pencil drawings, a crescent, a spiral, a stylized wave, photographed and sent in a text chain about an imaginary country, from a hotel room in Boston by a woman who was simultaneously negotiating a multi-continent expansion for a billion-dollar company. He looked at the drawings for a moment. Which one do you like? He said. The wave, Maisie said. Obviously. Okay. I already told her. She said good choice. Maisie put the phone away with the satisfied air of someone whose collaborative project was on track. Logan turned back to the stove and said nothing and felt something move through him that didn't have a simple name. Spring break was the last week of March. They flew to Boston on a Saturday. Maisie had been on exactly 1 plane before, at age 4, and remembered nothing of it, which meant this was functionally her first flight. And she treated the entire airport process with the focused alertness of a documentary subject who understood she was being filmed by history. She asked Logan questions about everything: the security conveyor belt, the jet bridge, the function of the overhead bins, and he answered all of them and was glad the flight was 90 minutes. Victoria met them at baggage claim. She was in a coat he hadn't seen before, dark blue, and she looked different in a way that took him a moment to identify. Not changed exactly, but more herself in some external context, the city visible through the glass doors behind her, her own ground. She looked like someone who fit where she was, which he had mostly seen with her at home in Richmond and which apparently also applied here, and he filed the observation without comment. Maisie walked directly to her and hugged her before Logan had collected the second bag. Victoria hugged her back with the easy certainty of someone who was no longer deciding how to do it. You're taller, Victoria said. I grew 5 millimeters, Maisie said. Since January. That's measurable. Mrs. Deacon measured me, for a science unit. She pulled back and looked up at Victoria. Did you eat? We ate on the plane, but it wasn't real food. I know a place, Victoria said. She did know a place. She knew 3 places in the surrounding blocks, which she had apparently been cataloging since arriving in February with the systematic approach she brought to most things. She took them to a restaurant near Faneuil Hall that had been there since 1973 and served the kind of food that made no apologies for itself. And Maisie ate approximately twice what she normally ate, which Victoria accepted as a review. She doesn't usually eat like that, Logan said. Travel metabolism, Victoria said. That's not a thing. It should be. He looked at her across the table. She was cutting something on her plate without looking at it, half watching Maisie, who had turned to look at the harbor visible through the window. This was the first time in 6 weeks he'd been in the same room with her, and it had the specific quality of calibration. Reassembling something that had been slightly out of tune and finding that the notes still held. You look good, he said. She looked up. Don't say that like you're surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm just saying it. She held his gaze for a moment. You look tired. Churchill hit a second structural issue. Of course it did. And the Carytown deck client changed the design twice. After framing? After framing. She looked pained on his behalf, which was the correct response. Did you charge them for the change? I should have charged them more than I did. Yes, she said. You should have. She pointed at him with her fork. We've talked about your pricing. We've talked about your tendency to tell me how to run my business. I don't tell you how to run it. I tell you where you're undercharging. Same thing. Fundamentally different thing. Maisie turned back from the window. Are you two arguing? No, they said simultaneously, which made Maisie raise her eyebrows with the expression she'd been developing lately that Logan recognized as the precursor to genuine teenage skepticism and which he was not ready for. It sounds like arguing, she said. It's a discussion, Victoria said. Dad argues like that with Ruth. He argues with Ruth about different things. What do you argue about? Pricing, Logan said. Dad's bad at charging enough, Maisie said to Victoria, with the tone of someone confirming shared intelligence. He fixed Mr. Henderson's whole fence for $40. Victoria looked at him. He's a retired veteran on a fixed income, Logan said.